Well, good morning, everybody. On our first map here today, I want to look back at the last 7 days of total accumulated precipitation. And overall, what we see here is just tremendously heavy rain throughout parts of the plains, especially down here in parts of Texas, New Mexico, and into Oklahoma. There were certain sections here of Texas that recorded over the last 7 days well in excess of 7 inches of rainfall, causing just a tremendous amount of flooding. And some of this has it really impacted a lot of crops that are grown in the Panhandle, plus livestock operations. We can also just continue to see these heavy rainfall events over toward Kansas City or towards parts of northeastern Colorado, western Nebraska, and this just continues to follow up the western and high plains, clear into parts of Montana and all the way into parts of the Canadian Prairie, where there's been some impressive storms, including some pretty photogenic tornado events. We also saw, now this was quite a while ago, last weekend, that large event, that low pressure center that came in and just soaked this part of the Carolinas, getting to Virginia and over toward the Appalachian Mountains. Now, nearly every bit of this pattern is going to continue this week, except for what you saw right here last weekend, because over the next 7 days, there's really been no change. So we continue to have the weak flow coming in, these little troughs cutting across parts of California, going here toward like Montana. There's this subtropical jet kind of filling this in, but very stagnant upper level flow across a broad section here of the rest of the country. And that's still on for at least another 7, possibly 8, 9, 10 days from now. That continues to be the overall prediction with the setup of this pattern. And our just biggest concern is what really the last 30 days has done. So this is the newest update from the AHPS data looking at percent of normal precipitation. And just a reminder, in the last 30 days, there are still a few pockets that are east of the Rocky Mountains here that have not measured precipitation. So I'm thinking specifically about this corridor in through here in Nebraska. There are pockets in Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, the upper Midwest. But take a look at this section of Michigan, getting into the eastern Corn Belt, and then, of course, here in this part of New England. Now, there's better rainfall chances in New England coming soon with the low that's going to curl up here. But where we've had all this just tremendous amounts of rain is going to continue for the next week. Now, when I make this graphic, and again, I use the AHPS data from this, I typically just go from 0 to 325%. But I'd like to make a point that right in through here, we do have some locations that are sitting between 600 and 1200% of normal. And just taking you to the AHPS website, you can see up here, again, a great resource. We can kind of zoom in and just have a closer look at some of these heavy rainfall events. It goes off their color bar as well, and they go up to 600%. So we're just going to continue to track these heavy rains as they continue to hit some very important cropland, rangeland, forage land here in the western plains. But do just want to continue to note these incredibly dry patches throughout much of the Midwest, getting into New England, that are desperate for rainfall. Now, thinking again about some of the very heavy rainfall events here in Texas, I just want to show you, I pulled this up this morning for Amarillo, and note that at one point back in April, we were matching the driest start to any year in the last 5 years. And since then, we've now moved to the wettest such time frame. So some of these locations here have gone from, having just a couple of inches to picking up over 10 to 11 inches just in a short amount of time here. Now, our all hazards weather map this morning continues to show the flood watches, and there's still flood warnings out for parts of the Panhandle of Texas, but the flood watches extend from here up into parts of Montana. And we do have several locations here in the central and eastern Corn Belt getting over to the East Coast that do have air quality alerts out for the rest of the day today, especially as the heat begins to really build in the Midwestern part of the United States. An interesting side note to all of this is that for this new crop that's in across the United States, the last 30 days when looking at cumulative downward solar flux, so in other words, we're looking here at how much the atmosphere has attenuated solar energy getting down to the surface, we have a surplus in these colors compared to normal and a deficit here. So this is really a measure of cloud cover. And again, we can see, this part of the Southwest getting into Texas is having much more cloudy conditions. Same thing for parts of the Southeast. But notice from New England back to the Midwest, here stretching up into the Western Canadian Prairie, this is where we've certainly seen more sunshine than not when compared to the historical averages. So just an interesting consequence to the precipitation patterns we've seen as of late. All right, back into the forecast. We're going to watch once again this part of Texas today. We do have a hail and wind threat down here, and there's always, with every storm, the risk of in this time of year in Texas, the risk of some of them rotating and producing tornadoes. But I'd like to show you the latest update from the high-res NAM. We'll pick this up at 8 o'clock this morning on Friday. So a few things I'll be watching. This is Tropical Depression 2. It's heading south. We're going to see flow coming out of the northeast across the southeast. So the storm systems, the moisture and scattered showers are going to come from this direction. You're just going to continue to see in this whole corridor active storms, scattered storms here, and nothing the farther east that we go. And so as we play this forward, this is getting through the day on Friday. We're going to keep a very close eye on a complex of storms that's been forecast to erupt here tonight, let's call it 5, 6 o'clock, and how the model is attempting to take that out as a large line of storms through parts of western Texas over toward the Red River Valley and south. Now you saw, as I just go back here into the evening, all of the convective events that are popping here on the heat of the day. This is what we call isolated or scattered storms, and some places are going to get the moisture they need to carry them through this next 10-day dry time period. And some are just going to get missed, and that is an unfortunate side effect of this particular pattern. So into the overnight hours, picking up on Saturday morning, we're going to watch what could be what's left of that mesoscale event kind of curling up into a mesoscale convective vortex and maybe moving north. That'll just be something to watch out for. And then again, we just see Saturday. Notice a couple of things here. The trajectory of scattered showers and storms coming across the east is out of the northeast. We'll take a look more of that in just a few seconds. But there will still be on Saturday more scattered convective events, but the heaviest rains will stretch the plains here. Then we go into Saturday night and just park this here early Sunday morning through midday Sunday. And again, it's a lot of the same scenario going forward. Quick update on the tropical system, Tropical Depression 2. I'm using the 4 a.m. Eastern Time update here. They are anticipating this continuing to move south. And this is just indicative of the bigger issues we're having in the flow. So instead of having a ridge parked over the southeast, which would be pumping a bunch of moisture into the Midwest, we have general troughing. And there's flow kind of coming in like this, pushing this system farther to the south. And we can see it. If we just take a look at the satellite imagery as the sun was rising this morning, there's the circulation we're talking about. But going back to yesterday, as lows just continue to develop in the mountains here, on the nose of that weaker flow, you're going to watch down here to the south that we're caught more in a trajectory like this. That's going to start to move Tropical Depression 2 away from the U.S. coast and farther to the south. Here's maybe a better way to look at it. Okay, troughs coming in. This is the low-level moisture pull right up the plains. Here's the flow we talked about coming out of the northeast through the east coast. And this is some of the steering current that's going to take Tropical Depression 2 south. All right. Something else to note on this, if we just kind of slide over, if you watch last night's in-depth report, this is the current position of the Bermuda High right now. And it has spent a lot of time much closer to Spain and Africa than it has spent toward Bermuda, which is here. So it's just a continued narrative from what we talked about just yesterday. Bigger picture things. The next 10 days, not much of a change in this forecast. This is the probability of getting an inch of precipitation in the next 10 days. And here's that probability of getting less than a half inch. So it's really been a continuation overall. And what we're stressed about here is that we saw in the latest drought monitor the expansion of drought farther into the central Corn Belt, the upper Midwest, into interior parts of the Northeast here. And that has been just front of mind as we start this month of June, knowing that the next 10 days is going to continue to be drier for this area, with the exception of some isolated storms. Now, we've been discussing this potential pattern shift going toward June 10th, bringing rain into some of these areas. But I want to just stress again, this is not the end-all event. It doesn't just come through and save everything. It's just breaking away from the dryness in that area, returning some moisture. And we do not have the best model agreement on what's going to happen here. So I'd like to compare the ensemble forecast from the GFS and then to the European. So what you're going to watch here with me is a 24-hour sliding window of total precipitation. The first animation is from the GFS ensemble. It's a 31-member ensemble. And what we're going to do here is just see how through this weekend into early next week, we're going to watch a front slide through next Tuesday. And then what we're going to watch carefully here is just keep an eye on this really dry region. We're going to watch after the 9th. here we are into the 10th and 11th. Do you see the model increasing the precipitation in this area? That's partly induced by a pattern shift. We're flattening out the pattern, returning a ridge farther to the west. The GFS is bringing in a much deeper trough into this region, and it's expected to increase precipitation. So that is, I'll rock over it again, the 10th through the 13th. All right, the 10th through the 13th. Now let's go back to the beginning, and let's flip this over to the European ensemble. Same thing, goes out 15 days. This is a 51-member ensemble, and it's a little bit higher resolution. So through Monday into Tuesday, see the front sliding? Did you notice that? You can see the precipitation aligning along it. It's Tuesday into Wednesday. Now here we are on the 9th and the 10th. Now you notice it's starting to fill this in, but it is not as aggressive as the GFS. It does bring in that precipitation. See it right there? But the big difference is that the European model keeps a hole in through here that's a bit drier. And that's a narrative we've had now for the last several days of these forecast videos. So the European model says if you're going to keep the open corridor, it's between these arrows. It's in this region. Whereas the GFS brings it much farther to the north and delivers moisture farther to the north and farther to the east as well. So we would just make the same statement we've made all week. The GFS is more aggressive. It has got more moisture in it, and it's pushing harder to push this precipitation through. We can especially see that even when we compare the models. Ready? This will just go over the next 7 days. We'll park it out there at 7 days here. And then this will be day 7 through day 10. I'm adding right up to now. So you see that front coming through. Look, watch Minnesota, Wisconsin, Northern Illinois. That's the front coming through here. That would be after the 10th. And then it continues to fill in Missouri, Western Kentucky, Tennessee, getting into the Eastern Corn Belt. That's been a trend in the model. Again, the 10th through the 12th. Now, the GFS operational run goes out to 16 days, whereas the European only goes out 10. So it will not capture this yet. But this is what the European model is doing. This is already through Monday, getting out into next Wednesday, Thursday. This is a week out right here. And then we go on beyond that into Saturday and Sunday. Now, do you notice this is the 10th and the 11th? Is the European model bringing that through? It is not. It is not. It's actually trended a little drier during this time period. In fact, if we look out there at that week 2 forecast, the CPC reduced the area of being below normal. The GFS reduced the area of being below normal. The European model has kept it and, in fact, made it worse or drier. Let me rephrase that. Drier here in Iowa and Minnesota. So that makes this recent precipitation in Iowa and Minnesota that much more critical to the forecast. I want to comment, too, on this graphic put together by my friend Ryan Maui. The European model, these are the operational runs, okay, not the ensemble, but the operational runs. In blue, you can see that the European model has a higher, consistently higher skill score, but over the last 30 days, almost 3% better than the GFS. And it's important to note that both models have trended downward in their skill, but in red, we can see the GFS has been lower. So we have to take that into consideration when looking at these forecasts. Longer term, though, we continue to see that the CFSV2, okay, it's bringing that moisture into this corridor, June 15th through the 21st. And then you go out there the 22nd through the 28th, and it still has this opening up to typical El Nino-like late June precipitation. But this is still, very much in the future. We're still waiting to see this pattern get here. And it is just, I don't know about you all, but I feel very impatient about waiting for this to occur. We feel like we've been talking about it for weeks, and it's still 10 days away from us in terms of the transition. From there, I do want to show you the newest DCMWF weeklies. This is June 10 to July 10. And about the most important trend I can tell you is that the newest DCMWF 30-day outlook did trend drier inside of that hole. It still has active corridor in through here, and it is likely biased most heavily to the next 10 days. And that's just carrying that forward. But we need to just watch this carefully. Temperatures, this is what today's high temperatures are going to look like. It is a hot one throughout much of the upper Midwest into New England, cooler southeast, cooler up where all the storms are going to be. We go from Friday into Saturday, another scorcher here, some places pushing up to 30 degrees above normal in Wisconsin. We go from there into Sunday's temperatures. This is a lot of midsummer. This would be hot for midsummer in this area. But then early next week, Monday, Tuesday, heat returns to the northwest as the pattern begins its shift around the 6th, 7th, and 8th. Cooler into New England, cooler in the south, cooler into California. In fact, California is really, we have yet to have a decent episode of heat. We're behind on the accumulation of heat units compared to the last several years. And while it's been comfortable, the crop actually needs the heat back in the system. We need to be watching out for that carefully. Total evaporation over the next week, we continue to see 1.5 to 2 inches in through this corridor where the heat is coming. We know that it's going to be drier and there's only isolated convection. And then we look out there at that 7-day GDD map, and it really just hasn't changed much. There are new data in this map, but it's just such a consistent forecast. This is what we continue to expect to see. But we know, and we've been forecasting quite well, that once you get out there beyond that June 7, 8, 9, 10 time frame, watch the cooler air moving in east. See it there? The cooler air arriving in the central Corn Belt and backing itself off to the west. And that is where the kind of hope lies in the shift in the pattern to begin to deliver better rains to this section of the country. To be honest, this is a very 2009 look in terms of the temperature pattern. We've kind of played around with that analog a little bit, but a lot of other forces at play here, especially that Bermuda high and influencing this particular setup. So we'll continue with that narrative next week. Finally, I do just want to have you later on today go to the CPC website. It's just cpc.ncep.noaa.gov, or you just Google CPC weather and you'll find it. And what we're going to be watching for is they're going to release later today their newest updates on week 3, week 4. And this will be an important addition to that kind of long-term forecast we've been providing. So please use those as a resource. Okay, I'll talk to you again next week. Thanks.